As you guys have probably noticed by now, we haven't been able to meet in quite a while, so I'm going to make another one of those educational videos on finance. A lot of you also said that dumping a lot of information on you guys at one point makes it a bit hard to understand, so I'm going to, that's all the more reason to make this video. I'm going to keep it relatively short, maybe 10 minutes at the most, so it shouldn't be too hard to digest, and you can keep referring back to it if you don't understand something completely. But anyway, if you guys have been following markets, you'd know that one of the major wildcards driving markets right now is the European financial crisis. And I think it's valuable to understand the European financial crisis, what the possible outcomes are, why it came to arise, and why it's important, because it plays a major role in setting stock prices right now. So to understand it, we have to understand first why the eurozone came into existence, what its origins are, and you know why they created it. So let's look at the European Union right now. So all of this is the European Union. The countries in blue are part of the eurozone, which means they are EU members that actually use the euro as their currency. The countries in red are still European Union members, but they do not use the euro as their currency. But they still benefit from things like the free trade agreements and whatnot. For example, the United Kingdom, still a European Union member, but they use the pound sterling, not the euro. The countries in yellow, those are European Exchange Rate Mechanism 2 members. So the ERM2 members, that just means that they still retain their own currency, but they peg it to the euro. So kind of like a middle ground between the blue and the red countries. These countries are kind of, they probably want to become Eurozone members in the future and are just kind of easing their way into it. So to understand where the euro came from, like why the common currency was created, let's backtrack to, say, 1989. So back then there was no common currency. What there was an agreement between all of these countries, all of the European Union members, to peg their currencies and make them trade within a relatively tight range to this thing called the European Monetary Unit, and we'll call it EMU for short. So what the EMU was just a weighted market basket average of the currencies of the individual country. So like a weighted average of the value of the Deutschmark, the pound sterling, the drachma, whatever, and all of these currencies averaged together, and that created the EMU, and that was just given a value of 1, say. And then those same individual currencies had an exchange rate relative to the EMU. So say the pound sterling had an exchange rate of 1.2 relative to the EMU, and these countries had to keep their exchange rates within plus or minus 5%. So plus or minus 5% of their, they couldn't let their exchange rates deviate plus or minus 5%. So why was that important? We have to explore that, and hopefully you guys have some knowledge about why how currency fluctuations affect trade between countries. If not, you guys should check out a video on Khan Academy or Investopedia. Actually, I'll just post a link in the comments section for one of the videos or an article or something. But in a nutshell, I'll illustrate why that's important really quickly with an example. Say the pound sterling is trading 2 to 1 to the German Deutschmark. And let's say it falls and it turns into 2.5 to 1 to the Deutschmark. And yet, yes, that is falling because now it takes 2.5 pound sterling to buy the same thing as it would have taken 2 before. So you're paying more for the same thing. This would reduce the purchasing power of the pound sterling, obviously, and uh, the goods made in Germany would now become harder to buy in the United Kingdom. They would become more expensive. So your Audis, your Mercedes, your BMWs, all would become more expensive in the UK. And this would hurt UK consumers and German exporters. On the flip side, since since the pound sterling is depreciating against the Deutschmark, that means the Deutschmark is appreciating against the pound sterling. So goods made in the UK would be cheaper to buy in Germany. So your Jaguars and Land Rovers and your Lotuses all would be cheaper to buy in Germany now. So that benefits UK exporters. The videos I post will cover that in a bit more detail if you don't understand that. But essentially keeping the currencies trading within a fairly narrow band helps trade between these countries. But it wasn't so easy to keep the currencies trading in this band. The central banks of the countries had to continuously buy and sell currencies on the open market to keep their own respective currencies within the band. And this wasn't cheap. This wasn't easy. Oftentimes, they would fall out of the 5% range, and it became pretty apparent that this 5% range was pretty unfeasible. It just was not attainable at the time, at least. And they decided to change that to plus or minus 15%. Obviously, a lot easier to keep the currencies trading in that band rather than like 5%. But at the same time, this wasn't easy either. For one thing, there's only so much currency a central bank can buy or sell. It actually costs the central banks oftentimes take a loss on these trades to keep the currencies from deviating out of the bands. And on top of that, fiscal and monetary conditions within these countries were really different. Most notably, at around 1990, interest rates in Germany were 6%. 6% in Germany. And the interest rates in the UK were far less. I can't remember the exact number, but just take my word for it when I say it was considerably less. So why does this matter? Well, if you're going to get 6% interest in Germany, wouldn't you want to convert all your money into Deutschmarks and put them in a German bank? That way you make a lot more money. Why would you want to keep your money in, say, pound sterling, where you're only getting maybe 2% interest? And that's exactly what happened. A lot of investors just took their money out and put them in, and converted it to Deutschmarks and put them in German banks. And that put a lot of downward pressure on the pound sterling. The Bank of England was hard-pressed to keep it above the 15% mark. Keep it from deviating beyond that band. And currency speculators saw this. Currency traders decided, well, they looked at the currency and said, well, clearly the pound sterling is overvalued, and it would be a good idea to probably short it now because there's only so much the Bank of England can do. They can't keep on doing it forever. And one of the most famous of these currency speculators was this guy, George Soros. You've probably heard of him. He's very famous. And the reason he's famous is because of a little incident called Black Wednesday. What he did was he saw an opportunity in the Forex market. He saw that the pound sterling was way overvalued compared to the Deutschmark. So he decided to borrow 10 billion, and yes, that's billion with a B, pound sterling, and convert that into Deutschmarks. He made a profit of $1 billion on that trade, and it was probably one of the most massive currency shorts of all time. And why is that so significant? Well, because it was sort of a self-fulfilling prophecy, if you look here. So within one day, the pound sterling fell roughly it looks like about 7% against the Deutschmark. And that's insane, especially for currency. But why was this? Understandably, yes, the pound sterling was overvalued compared to the Deutschmark, but did it necessarily have to shed this much in one day? I mean, it would have dropped eventually, but maybe it could have been 2 weeks from now or a month from now, and it could have happened more gradually. But instead, because George Soros decided to make that massive short, and 10 billion is no small number, it essentially moved markets. People watching markets that day panicked or saw a huge opportunity, jumped onto the bandwagon, and decided to do the same thing he did. And it pushed down prices even further. So from 2.8, it jumped down or it dropped down all the way to 2.4 within like 2 weeks, which is insane. That drop is estimated to have cost Great Britain around $35 billion in economic activity, which although it didn't like devastate the economy, it was still a pretty big loss, pretty significant, and they wanted to make sure it doesn't happen again. So one thing this incident pointed out was that just tying the currencies into a band, or pegging them against each other rather, does not protect them from speculative attacks. So this made it apparent that a common currency was needed. So they created the euro, because if you have the same currency, you can't just pick off, a single country. You can't single out a country and pick off its currency because they all have the same currency now. So that eliminated currency speculation. I'm well over my 10-minute limit now, so I'm just going to cover in the next video. I'll cover how, like, why this didn't solve the problem entirely and why we're in the situation we're in right now. Until then, see ya.